right, welcome everyone. I'm very glad that you could join us today. My name is Paula Newcomb and I'm the Northeast Regional Coordinator of the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. I will be the host and question moderator for today's webinar, Make It, Tips on Starting or Expanding Your Library's Makerspace. If you have questions during the webinar, feel free to put them in the chat and we will try to answer them as we go along. So today's presenters are Elizabeth Adams, the Community Learning Librarian, and Pam Okasan, Community Learning Manager of the LaPorte County Public Library. So after this webinar has been transcribed, it will be available on the Indiana State Library's archived webinars page. If you're watching an archived recording of this presentation, information on how to obtain your LEU is in the video's description in YouTube. For weekly updates on upcoming trainings and to learn more about what's happening in libraries across the state, please subscribe to the Indiana State Library's e-newsletter, The Wednesday Word, and check our continuing education website for other professional development opportunities. And just as a reminder, in the chat, be sure to change the host and panelists to everyone. It is sometimes set by default to hosts and panelists, so I just want to make sure that everyone can see your questions and your insights. All right, I'm going to stop sharing without further ado. I'm now going to hand the presentation over to Elizabeth and Pam.
All right, thanks, Paula. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen. Up. All right, are we seeing everything? Looks good. Okay. Well, thank you. We're so excited to be here today and share with everyone a little bit more about our Makerspace at the LaPorte County Public Library. We certainly don't know everything, but we've learned a lot, especially over the past few years moving into our larger space. And we're kind of excited to share what we have learned along the way. So the purpose of the presentation is just give an overview of the space and how we got started, what we offer to the public, and some of those lessons learned along the way that might be helpful if you are thinking of starting a makerspace or a version of that, or expanding your own existing space. So Pam is going to tell you a little bit about the history of the Exchange.
Well, thank you, everyone. It's great to be here. In 2013, the LaPorte County Public Library started conversations with library staff around developing a makerspace. And at that time, we did not have space, physical space in the library to solely dedicate for this purpose. But we didn't let that stop us. We opted to start by going mobile. After many conversations with community partners and local businesses, we selected equipment that met community interests, were locally aligned with work conducted by local businesses, and importantly, that the equipment was safe. For examples, these included Dash and Sphero robots, Little Bits, Makey devices, soldering kits, and a 3D printer that started out as a community build project. We offered classes and experiences at the main library in our meeting room space, but then we also traveled to branch locations, schools, and community events. And throughout our Makerspace journey, we have always collaborated with interested volunteers who have offered their time and their knowledge. In 2016, a renovation of the main library here in LaPorte was conducted, and when it was complete, we had a makerspace room that was created for that purpose. The room was dual purpose, multi-purpose. It served as both a classroom and was the open makerspace, but we didn't have enough space for everything to stay out all of the time. So we had storage in that room, and it required a lot of setup, takedown, and resetting for the various uses of the space. Around this same time, a family approached the library with an offer of a multi-story, long vacant historic building in LaPorte, circa 1895 that building was built, and it sits kitty corner across the street from the main library in LaPorte. This building historically was an early automated telephone switching station. So that you can tell with the exchanges that the operators would have used for that switching That's where we get our name Exchange from. That building became the home of our makerspace and collaboration spaces. That includes a large classroom and 2 smaller meeting rooms. So we thought it would be fun to give you a tour, and Elizabeth is going to play a approximately 3-minute video that will give you sort of a virtual tour of the space.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to move into a little bit about the goals that we have in our space. So the first thing is to provide a free public resource that promotes lifelong learning and self-led learning. The first thing you might notice, it's definitely something people notice when they come here for their first time, is the free part. But yes, it is free, like many other library resources. We'll set someone up with a library card or a reciprocal card if they don't have one. There's no charge to use our equipment. We have basic supplies available that are also free, especially while someone is learning. That part gets a little more nuanced, but we really want people to start bringing in their own supplies once they've had some time to practice. But we don't want that to be a hindrance either. In most cases, that goes really smoothly. People try out a few things, get really excited about what they want to make, and then come bring their own stuff. And even some of our makers who may not have the most funds to go and purchase supplies have found really creative ways to get things and make some really cool stuff in the space. So the reason it's free is that our library board from the start did not want money to be a barrier to people learning and participating and being part of the space. So we promote lifelong learning. That's a really big part of our strategic plan for the whole library. And this is kind of the perfect place to grow that and expand on that. We really see a wide range of ages interacting and learning in the space. And the really fun part is that applies to the staff too. We've learned so much from our customers along the way, and then we get to pass that knowledge on even further. So it's a really great place to kind of share amongst people with all of the information that we've gathered along the way. And then I'm going to come back to the self-led learning part, kind of explain a little more what we mean with that one, but that is also part of it. So another one is we provide access to equipment and resources, and it's beyond just the equipment that you see in the building. It's staff are resources. We connect our customers to a lot of other resources, be that digital. We have a lot of other things available through the library, like LinkedIn Learning and Creative Bug, and all the digital resources to get books and that kind of thing. So we also connect with that as part of that learning process. We provide knowledgeable staff to instruct on equipment and assist with troubleshooting. So staff are always present to help, particularly with training on equipment and troubleshooting if there's any issue with equipment. We're not necessarily project assistants, but that also ties into this kind of supported self-led learning that I'll expand on a little later. We provide creative programming that promotes our values. So we try to create programming to introduce our customers to our equipment, learn a new skill, or maybe learn some soft skills. That's kind of the understated part of everything that we do here is, that's really valuable, learning those soft skills along the way, from following instructions to completing a project from beginning to end, how to troubleshoot something. And they might be using a computer to do some design for the first time or have never used pliers. So there's a lot of nuance in what people are learning and what they can be exposed to in the space. We try to create a welcoming space where people can learn new things and explore creativity. Mistakes are okay here. I think that's a little bit of retraining we have to do with some people that are very afraid to fail. But that's really kind of the goal here. Try something out, see how it goes. If it doesn't work, maybe look into it a little further and go from there and kind of readjust and see how far you can get. We really want this space to be like a third space. Like a lot of libraries are third spaces for people. There's home and work and school and maybe your coffee shop or your church, that kind of thing, but also having a space like this where you can feel welcome and comfortable and be creative, we think is a really valuable component to add to our community. So we're really proud of that. Part of it is you don't have to come here and use the equipment. We want to take a little bit of emphasis off of that. It's about talking to other people who have a similar interest or maybe totally different interests, and you can learn something new. Being part of the programming, meeting new people, that kind of thing is really important to us too. And then along with that, we build a community that celebrates making, creating, and sharing knowledge with others. And there's a lot of different ways we do that. It's the interactions between staff and our makers, or our volunteers and the makers. And we do that with some of our programming too. We have one program that's an ongoing one that's called Make Local, Meet the Makers. And that's where we bring in someone from the community who has maybe a really creative hobby or a career, and we just have them kind of talk about why they create, with the hopes of kind of inspiring others, building that community, and celebrating all of the talent that exists locally in our community. So those are kind of our main goals. I mean, that's ever evolving, but generally that's kind of where we're headed with things. Okay, so in the video you saw a bit of what we offer. There's a list there of our equipment. One of the things that we are doing in our spaces, we're always kind of evaluating what's working, when is it time to upgrade something, when we might want to add something new. We receive a lot of suggestions from our customers, which is really helpful because we want this to be something that has things that people locally really want to use. And then we also try to tie in what we offer to some local, job opportunities, that kind of thing, to kind of complete that circle there. But we're kind of always reevaluating. You have to think about the capacity of your staff. If you keep adding more and more things, you have to be able to know how to use them, have your staff trained to be able to teach others, keeping safety in mind and all of that. And so it's really about what fits into our needs and capacity along the way. We also have meeting rooms, and we have a very large classroom space that we can do some of our programming in, but it's also available for nonprofits, community groups come have their meetings. And it's really great for us because it brings new people into the space too. When they come for that meeting, they can have a tour of the space while they're at it. And then we also have kind of an open space on our first floor where people can just hang out, and there's a couch and some other seating areas. So we have people come and study or meet up with others and use that space. We do a lot of programming. So we do things both in the building and out in the community. We have programs that range from make and take style classes. We do demo classes, and we have things like our STEAM camps, which are really big, especially in the summertime. And we've done some specific partnerships with other like local youth serving organizations. We did 6 weeks of programs for a local group. We're headed out to our local airport again this summer to do some programming. So there's a lot of different ways that we're going beyond the walls of the building. And that's something that we really hope to grow over time as we're getting really settled into the space. Since we only opened just under 2 years ago in this new space. But as we're getting settled, we hope to build some of those partnerships and kind of move those forward. Okay.
Elizabeth, we did have a question real quick. Is this space staffed by library staff or is it a separate entity?
It is all library staff. We do have some volunteers that help us. Pam, do you want to add to that?
Sure. That's a great question, because when we were going to talk about staffing, I was going to talk about how our library staffing has changed. But the question Andrew's asking is a little bit bigger than that. Is this a separate entity? So the Exchange is actually the newest of our locations as a library, and it's staffed. Our team, besides myself, there are 7 team members. We've had to make some adjustments over time with the number of librarians versus paraprofessionals that are staffing this space so that we can adequately serve the public during our open hours. And so as we grew and changed, we adjusted that a little bit. And if that doesn't answer your question, Andrew, please chime in and ask a little bit more.
Okay, so we have a process to get people started. The big thing is it's kind of revolving around safety for the space. So we do have everyone sign a waiver the first time that they come to use the equipment. And we also have people complete an in-person training with a staff member on the equipment that they've chosen. So that's something people can schedule in advance. We've tried some of the walk-in style option. It just depends on how many staff we have available. But that one-on-one training is you come in, meet with a staff person. We kind of walk you through the basics of how to use the equipment, go over any safety. And then we kind of review our policies and our safety rules in this space as well. And I'll talk a little bit more about safety later on. And then if they don't have a library card, we'll sign them up for a library card. And once people complete that first session, they will also get a FabMan card. So that box you see down in the bottom corner picture there, we have these little boxes at each of our equipment. And what happens is when someone does their training, we put that in their account and give them this card, or they can scan it with their smartphone. And that is what powers on the machine. So it helps us with safety tracking, like only people who have been trained can turn on that piece of equipment. It also helps us kind of see usage of equipment over time, and it allows our customers to reserve in advance. So they can go ahead and if they know they have an afternoon free, they can book the machine and come in and know that it'll be available. As far as age restrictions, I think that's really something important to consider in your own makerspace. We have, so 8 to 11 are welcome in the space, but they do have to have an adult with them. 12 to 18, teens can come on their own, especially once that parent has signed a waiver. And then adult makers. We have a few extra restrictions on some equipment. You have to be 12 or older to use a few of the more difficult or risky pieces of equipment that we have. But that's kind of the general process. And we get people started. Once they're trained, they're welcome to come back and use that equipment whenever we're open.
I want to chime in, Elizabeth, briefly to mention that we use, many of you might be familiar with Niche Academy. We use Niche Academy to develop, initially we were using the courses there as a way for people to get information about the equipment before we would do the training. We've transitioned that a little bit to be more of a resource that people can use either, I'll use education terms here, as a pre-lesson to learn about the machine, or as post information after they've been trained and they're using a machine. Maybe they forget some steps, they need a refresher, they're ready to go on to a little bit more advanced step, and they know that that information is in the Niche Academy course. That's always readily available for them. So we use that significantly.
Yeah, along with that, we also have some like written guides near most of the equipment that people can kind of grab as a quick refresh. And we make the manuals available for all of the equipment too, for some of that troubleshooting. All right, so as far as safety goes, I mentioned the waiver and the training process. We also expect all of our customers to follow our regular library policies. And then in addition to that, we have some Makerspace policies, just kind of reiterating safety, what's acceptable in the space. And there's a thing in there that if there's some issues, we may temporarily pull access to that piece of equipment, usually until we can get someone retrained. In most cases, it's just they haven't been there in a long time or they need some retraining, and we'll work with people from there. And then we also have a lot of safety considerations around our equipment and materials. So you can kind of see in that one picture with our big epilogue laser cutter, we have ventilation off of that to help pull the kind of the smoke and everything that comes from that process. We have fire blankets and special fire extinguishers. We kind of post our safety rules around the space. And we only allow certain materials to be used in some of those machines, especially the laser cutters. There's an approved list of materials because some things can be kind of toxic when you cut them with a laser and introduce heat like that. And some things are just really, really tough on the machine. So there are certain things we don't allow. And that's information that comes along with that equipment too. We're pretty much just following kind of what's in the manuals, that type of thing. And then as far as 3D printing, we're careful with the kind of filament that we use. We try to pick one that's a little more environmentally friendly. And then some other things in the space, we have a big exhaust hood, our soldering station is set up under that. We offer PPE for our customers, so gloves, safety glasses, face shields when they're doing the woodworking. We have an eye wash station, all kinds of things like that. So I think something to consider if you're building in your space, like, some things are very straightforward in their safety considerations, like a Cricut and a sewing machine may seem very straightforward. But as you're adding more and more, definitely consider some of those different things that may come up as far as safety along the way. And that's another thing to train staff on. How do you respond to that? What are the first aid procedures? All of that kind of thing too. So kind of start small is a good way. Start simple and then add on. So it doesn't seem so overwhelming to keep track of all of that. All right. So some of our lessons learned so far, I'll let Pam kick this one off.
Yes, I've already mentioned a little bit about having to make some staffing adjustments as we moved along. Our paraprofessionals are what I would call our first point of contact for all of the public that comes in. They handle all of the day-to-day operations. They do a majority of the one-on-one equipment training, and I have 4 individuals who work in that capacity. Elizabeth and 2 other professionals are the librarians affiliated with the space, and they do a lot of planning around programs, researching, investigating how we might expand or use or teach on different things. So they're doing a little bit, maybe sort of a step up work for the team. And let me speak a little bit about budgeting. It frequently comes up how we were able to execute this project. So there were rainy day funds from tax disbursements that were set aside. And when we got this space and we developed a plan for this space, we were able to use those funds to do the renovation and outfit with equipment and furnishings to make this space possible. Elizabeth, you want to take over?
Sure. One of the things I'll mention about staffing too is we are a very mixed bunch here at the Exchange. So a few of us have traditional library backgrounds, that kind of thing, but then at least half of us have completely different backgrounds, made big career changes, but our common thread is that, we all love making and creating and sharing that with others. So it makes for a really dynamic team, and that's a really fun thing to have. So
let me chime in there just to say we've got a really broad stroke in age representation on our staff as well. We have on sort of the just out of graduating from college folks all the way up to retired individual who has decided to come back to work. So post-retirement has come back to join us and work in this space.
Okay, so some equipment training considerations. One of the things I think we realized pretty early on, I'm not sure I was entirely prepared for, especially not coming from the library world. But we knew we would see a wide range of ages that we would have to be able to teach, but we also see a lot of varying levels of abilities and, people who have vision impairments or issues with hand strength. So there were things from the beginning of how do we adjust we have this set plan on how we teach the equipment. How do we adjust that for all the different kinds of people that we see coming into the space so that they can all learn from what we have to offer? So that was something kind of figuring it out as we go, making of those accommodations, making things very accessible, and, kind of learning along the way. And our customers have been really lovely with giving us tips or hey, maybe if you tried this, that would be really helpful. So that's something to keep in mind. So you might be teaching 8-year-olds all the way to 90-year-olds and everything in between. And and it, it can really vary, but try to make it a really good learning experience. We do have some people who come to the space that we want them to come with a helper. And in that case, they both people are trained on how to use the equipment, and then they just come and work together. We have some people where we don't necessarily give them the access to the equipment right away. We may invite them back for a couple extra trainings, or we'll make sure we try to do a project with them just to make sure that they're comfortable with the equipment and kind of prepared to use it on their own when that time comes. But again, it's that creating the accessibility for every type of learning style and ability. So with programming, that kind of applies as well. And then what I want to talk about with our program is how, just like our equipment, we're kind of adjusting along the way. And I don't think we have it all figured out yet, but it's kind of an evolving process. What kind of programs work best? What format works best? We started with a lot of kind of the classic make and take style programs where you come for the 1.5 hour class and you make a small project that you take home with you. But we ran into a few issues with that. One of them being some of the things that we want to teach here, they just take longer than 1.5 hours. When you're learning like this totally new skill plus trying to complete a project, that's really hard to kind of jam into 1.5 hours, 2 hours. So we had to like really simplify our classes, and it just didn't feel really creative or like we were really providing the best option there. Another thing was we were always, because we didn't know who would be coming, we were always kind of teaching to the lowest skilled in the class, and that made it tricky for some of our customers who have more advanced skills. It wasn't super exciting class. There wasn't really a great way for them to kind of level up and take things further. And then another thing we were seeing is part of our goal with programming was to also encourage people to come back and use the space on their own. And we weren't seeing a lot of turnover there. So people would come to only the programs and then never use the space in between. And our more recent attempt at like kind of adjusting for this is that we're switching to some demo format classes. So it may be a class on how to sew tote bags, but it is showing a lot of different techniques, a lot of different options. If you already know how to sew and make a simple bag, here's how to level up and add zippers and box corners and that kind of thing. And so far, I would say those are going pretty well. It's absolutely working with having some turnover and people coming back to the space in between. So another thing we do with those classes is we have the demo portion. We leave it open for questions at the end. And then there's time built in where someone can go ahead and get started on a project if they really would like to, or they can set up their training to get, access to that piece of equipment that's involved. And kind of go from there. So it's a little more of a choose your own adventure class. And I think that's been a shift for some of our regulars who really liked that make and take style thing. So we do sprinkle those in still, especially our most popular classes, which is probably our pen turning class is always full no matter what. So we're doing a bit of both, but the demo classes are a nice way to let people customize their experience in our programs. Let's see, on communicating the process and the purpose to the community. So I think there's still, we're not, not that big of a community. It's not exactly a tiny town either, but there are a lot of people in our community that still don't even know that we exist. Or they're not sure if we're associated with the library. So that's something where they don't even know where to look because they don't realize all of the information is on the library's website. So that's one thing we're working on. How do we keep communicating out that we're here and what we offer? Word of mouth advertising has been the best for us. We have some very, very lovely customers who keep sharing information about the space, and that absolutely makes a difference in getting new people into the building. I think the process of getting started is another thing that we are trying to refine and simplify so that there's less kind of steps. It feels easier to get started, and making sure that that's all really clear when we're communicating it out is another thing that we're kind of evaluating and refining along the way. And then I think the overall purpose is still a little bit confusing. Like a makerspace is kind of this new concept. So not only getting people to understand that we exist in the community, but what is it? So that is part of that sharing out of what we do. We've definitely had people come in and be very confused as to why we won't take their item and repair it for them, but we'll teach them how to repair it. So usually it ends up in a really lovely conversation about, actually, maybe I can fix my purse on my own, and sure, let's try it. But there's definitely that. So
I'm going to chime in. There's another good example of a local hardware store chain that has laser cutting services in their space, but it doesn't always meet the needs of people in their creation. Maybe the etching is too small. So they tell them that they can accomplish that with us, and they're expecting it to be a similar service where we will do it for them. So it's interesting the paths people take to come into this space. They may be referred because they couldn't get something done elsewhere, and they're coming in to look to have the work done for them, and they discover that actually they can learn and do it themselves. So there's many examples of that.
yeah. Okay, so the focus on self-led learning. This is something that I think we found is the trickier part of our work. So it's common for our customers to kind of want to depend on us to help them with their full project along the way. But we really, in many cases, we don't have the capacity to do that, especially when the space is busy. And we might not have the depth of knowledge to help with every single aspect of a project. And we're a very creative bunch, but you can't know all of the things all of the time. So our goal is to try to help people find the answers to their questions on their own, kind of nudge them in that direction. And we really want to kind of build that confidence. Like, sure, you can go ask someone, and maybe that's a nice, simple way to get a solution. But if you want to dig in a little deeper, here's how you might look for those resources. We encourage people to practice. Again, it's the mistakes are okay. And then some of it is come to the space and try out this new thing, and maybe it's not for you, but that's kind of the nice part about being able to explore what we have here. We had some people in the beginning that were kind of like collecting the set. They were trying all of the equipment and getting trained on it, and then they would narrow in on like one or two things at the end. But it's a great opportunity to try out some things, see if you might be interested at all. So when I'm working with a customer, I'll give an example of how I might like handle a really big question. So I just got this one like a week and a half ago. Someone came in and said, so I have this fabric and I want to make a quilt. What do I do? I was like, oh, that's a really big question. There's a lot involved in making a whole quilt. So my approach is to kind of ask a few more questions. What's the end goal? What's the vision? What kind of a style are we going for? Do you even know what style you're going for? And then I might go grab a laptop and see if I can help them find some resources. So we might point them towards a creative bug class, which is like my favorite thing, because if you can find something similar on there and you have that available at your library, it's a great way to get people going, because it feels like a one-on-one experience, because you have that person on the video guiding you through every single part of the project. But you can also pause it and do the step and learn along the way. So point them to those kind of resources, maybe find a blog or some other things that are helpful in getting them started. And then if they don't have access to the equipment that they need yet, we can set up a training for them and get them going. And we answer some questions along the way or help troubleshoot with the machine. But what I'm not doing is sitting there and helping someone make their quilt from start to finish, as much as I would love to. But it's about really getting our customers to be confident that they can troubleshoot and learn this along the way. And that it's okay to kind of try again and see how it turns out. Anything else you would add to that, Pam?
Well, as a trained librarian, and for those of you who are librarians out there, it's kind of like the reference question too. It's teaching people how to fish rather than giving them a fish kind of thing. So, probing their interests and their information needs, in this case, it's making, and helping them learn to discover for themselves and be able to do some of that research on their own. When you role model it for them, they begin to take that on themselves in the self-led learning world.
Okay, so some additional tips, and some of you who have started Makerspaces already may have figured this out. Gradual changes are really key. It's about the capacity of your space. It's the capacity of your staff or volunteers. You don't have to do it all at once. We did not start with this giant building. It was a very gradual process over the years to build. And then the other thing is really kind of pay attention to what equipment your community is hoping to see. They're definitely not shy about sharing their suggestions, and you might not be able to accommodate everything, but kind of adding in those new things as the capacity and budget allows has worked really nicely. Have a plan for replacing equipment. Consider if some items come from vendors that may be tricky to purchase from, or things get discontinued and then that becomes a whole thing. So there's that kind of stuff along the way too that's not the most fun, but if you're kind of thinking about it in advance, it helps in those scenarios. Oh, and I'll mention too, with our getting feedback from the community, we did start like an internal kind of a suggestions form. So staff will enter in if someone says something, just so that we have a nice record of it. It's easy to forget those suggestions if you don't have a place to kind of store them. So I would recommend starting something like that too. And then embrace your volunteers. Our volunteers are a huge part of what we do. Some of them turn into staff after a while, but they're really there. So we have different styles that our volunteers kind of end up following. We have some who come to the space and kind of hang out there a couple afternoons a week, or they'll bring their own project and just kind of keep busy. But if a customer comes in who might need some extra help or really would like that one-on-one assistance, our volunteers are the people who kind of have the time to help them and guide them through that. We also have some volunteers who come specifically to help with programming or even lead some of our programs. So definitely, your staff can only know so much, and then that's where it's helpful to bring in the volunteers to round out different corners of interest and skills.
Volunteers have also played a significant role in helping staff skill up. Training on different equipment that if you've got some expertise, I think the drill press is a great example. You've got someone with some expertise on your volunteer crew who can help teach staff who haven't had much experience, but build some confidence so that they can help others. They play a significant role in that respect as well.
I'll mention too, we've been lucky to have student interns during the school year, and most of them are in the summer, but that's another opportunity to, I think we as staff learn as much from them as they learn from us. And not only is it a great opportunity for them, as they're heading to college or careers, that kind of thing, but having them help us in the space and give us suggestions along the way. It's a really nice, fresh perspective to have our interns work with us too. Again, make gradual changes to your programming and instruction. We also like to kind of peruse other library websites and see how do they describe their classes, or what kind of topics are they offering. So that's a really nice resource as well. Or look at other makerspaces. library makerspaces are very unique, but there's a lot you can pick up from some of the more independent makerspaces as well. The nice thing about running a makerspace that is part of the library is that all of that other infrastructure is there already. It's not starting totally from zero with that kind of thing. And then the big thing is have fun. It can be a lot of work depending on the size of your space. You see all the regular things that go on in libraries. You're maintaining equipment, developing programming, training, getting staff trained. But really the work is so fun and rewarding. It's my favorite part is when we have customers tell us just how excited they are to have something like this in our community. They'll say like, even the big cities don't have something like this. This is so great. And I'm so proud of our library that they've made this available for the community. So that's really cool to be a part of. And it really does make a wonderful impact. And you might not see it right away, but it absolutely makes a difference to have this available. So that's kind of my main topic. I don't know if you wanted to add anything else, Pam?
Paula just mentioned, I highly recommend in the chat, I highly recommend doing trips to other libraries. That was part of the story that I didn't tell with the history is in 2014, 2015, there were some of us who were dispatched either to local places that were within driving distance. For example, a Fab Lab up at the Lake Michigan Community College in Michigan. We went over to South Bend to see a for-profit makerspace if people went to conferences. They also stopped in and saw makerspaces along the way just to kind of gather information and get a vision of what's out there. And those conversations with other people that run makerspaces really do help inform some of the options and decisions that you might make along the way. So I highly encourage that as well. We can take any questions you have. There's lots of things popping up in the window. The video that Elizabeth shared is on our library YouTube channel. There's a small playlist for the LPCPL Exchange that you can watch. So we're happy to take questions.
Yeah, we've got a question earlier. What kinds of roles and levels of involvement do your volunteers have at the Exchange?
That's a very wide range of roles and supports. I think Elizabeth sort of described different ways that our volunteers are involved, either as a mentor in the space, would they come and work on their own projects and they make themselves available. Other volunteers actually instruct a program, like Elizabeth, for example, would coordinate with a volunteer who wants to offer something, or we recognize they have a skill and something special they could share with the community. So they might lead a program or be a program assistant. They've trained staff in various ways. So I'm not sure if that fully answers the question.
Okay, yeah, we do have some others as well. Do patrons or businesses ever donate materials?
Yes. Our Friends of the Library organization is very involved in supporting us. They do some fundraising, particularly for our STEAM camps. We also have applied at different times for grants over the years from, for example, Howmet Aerospace, or the local healthcare foundation has provided grants for us for either equipment or something that really paired well with what they're doing in the community.
Okay, and what would you say is your most popular piece of equipment?
It depends on the week. Sometimes there are things that like all of a sudden everyone's interested in. Around the holidays, it's the laser cutters because everyone's making their gifts. 3D printers have been pretty popular pretty consistently. I would say the sewing machines are quite popular, and then our wood lathes are another big one too, because that's something that a lot of people don't have at home. So Yeah, I would say it depends.
Yeah. And what kind of supplies do you keep on hand so that patrons don't need to bring it in themselves?
So in general, we keep things like we have black and white filament for the 3D printers. We'll have maybe black and white and a few other options in like heat transfer vinyl, those kind of things for the Cricut, some really basic fabric supply. And then we have the other little things you might need, like notions, or other little tools that are useful along the way. We have not just the sewing machines, but we have the quilting rulers and the rotary cutters and pins and clips and all of that to go along with it. So we try to make sure that most of what you need for a project is available. And then for the consumables, it's kind of the basics. Try to stick to kind of neutral colors and go from there and let people try that.
Okay. Would you be willing to share the tutorials that you use to train with Niche Academy?
Those are all available through our website. So if you visit laportelibrary.org, on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see the little, depending on the size of the screen, either the word learn or just a little light bulb, and you click on that, it'll pop it open, and you can filter for the Makerspace category and see all of our tutorials there.
Okay. We have a lot of great questions. The next one is, what does your dust collection look like for lathes, drill press, CNC? Any ongoing issues you've encountered with it?
Let me read the question if I'm not sure I fully understand.
It's around 10:45. Sydney Brink put that in.
The most popular?
Oh no, down below.
Oh, what does your dust collection look
Yes.
like? There we go, Elizabeth. Dust collection.
Yes. Okay. So we have the hood, the exhaust hood for the really, really fine kind of particulates. We have a really nice vacuum with a dust deputy on it. If you've never heard of one of those, they're fantastic to add on to your vacuum because it'll spin out all of the bigger, like wood chips, that kind of thing, so you don't fill your vacuum up super fast. So really after a class, we go around and clean up with that. We have that vent hood running the whole time if we're using the lathes. For the CNCs, it's just kind of cleaning it out along the way. Again, we're using a vacuum, or kind of scooping everything into the trays, dumping the trays out. That one, our CNC is very contained. So it's a fully encased thing. So it's not really making much of a mess along the way. In general, I think it's all gone pretty well. This is a surprisingly tidy space at the end of the day, which is very important for us too. So there's a lot of maintenance that goes into cleaning up. We teach our customers how to help clean up. That's a big part of it. We're always cleaning out the laser cutters, that kind of thing. So I don't know if we've run into any major issues with it, but that's definitely something to consider. Like we recently got a bandsaw, so that when we're running it, it will be hooked up with a vacuum to collect that dust right away. So I don't know if that answers the question, hopefully.
Thanks. And just to also let people know, I did put in the LEU request form in there in the chat, and I could put that in later as well. But that's for if you do need your library education unit. And for the ones who are watching the archived recording of the presentation, information on how to obtain your LEU will be in the description in YouTube. And also I added the emails, even though we've got the emails on the screen too. The next question, how much staffing do you have?
So we've mentioned that we have a team of 7 plus myself, 4 paraprofessionals, 3 professionals, and a manager.
Okay. Would you say you have a patron demographic that uses the space the most or the least?
I would say the most is probably our retiree group, especially during the weekdays. The weekends is very mixed. But that's probably what we see more of. But it's
Okay,
always changing.
good. Right, and another question, are you sharing the recording of this session? Yes, I will share that recording probably in a few hours. I will send it out to you all. How do your hours reflect projects? Some projects may take a lengthy amount of time.
There's kind of two questions there. First of all, before we opened this space, we made a recommendation to the board for what we thought the hours should be, and with dialogue with them, they set the hours when we opened initially, and our growth and use has been such that just a week ago, we brought a recommendation to our board to expand our hours, and our hours now will match the open hours of the main library in LaPorte. Some projects, yes, do need to run longer. We have one style of 3D printer that can run overnight, but we put a cap on the maximum length of time that it can run. A project can't run more than 24 hours, simply because we don't want to create a situation where someone's monopolizing something and impacting someone else's ability to use the space. Sometimes our CNC projects take a little longer. We're able to pause those and resume them the following day. Someone does need to be present while that machine is in operation. So those are the two examples I can think of.
Okay. Do you have to have library card to use these things, and can non-residents use them?
Yes, anyone who's using this space needs to have a library card first. We want people to remember and recognize that we are connected to the library, but that's where we start. And then from there, we proceed to the safety training, the signing of the waiver, and establishing the free FabMan account that they can use to make reservations or operate machines that they have endorsements for. Non-residents work like the state reciprocal card situation. So if someone comes to us, say from Lake County Public Library, they have an active account in good standing there, then we'll issue a reciprocal card with us. And then from there, we'll do the steps with access to the Makerspace tools.
Okay, thanks. I am putting in the LEU form. I did a thing that I said in the beginning not to do. I did not switch it to everyone. I left it on hosts. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, at this point, we do probably have a lot more questions. I think we're going to have to probably stop at this point. I want to really thank Pam and Elizabeth so much for being here today and for talking about their exchange, their Makerspace area. I will copy all the questions in the chat and get those sent to you guys, and you can get, answer what we didn't answer. Again, if you are watching this as a archive recording of the presentation, the information on how to get your LEU will be in YouTube's description. So I want to thank you all for being here, and hope you guys have a wonderful week.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.